Hey, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here this morning. Um, I'm Howard Brown, Senior Program Officer at the Pottstown Area Health and Wellness Foundation, and I'm also a proud member of the board of directors for TCN. Today, we really want to take some time to talk to the organizational and capacity and service implementation survey, right? We call it COCSI for short. So we'll be calling this COCSI throughout the presentation. And that survey took place in June. And today we're really going to be focused on the report, how the community responded and reflect on some of those key findings, as well as talk about next steps. And we really want this to be an engaging presentation. So please put on your thinking caps early this morning and get ready to type and enter things into the chat when we're prompted. But the purpose of the COCSI survey was threefold. We wanted to gather local nonprofit organizational needs and utilize this data for initiatives and program development, as well as share the findings with community partners. And today is one of those efforts to share and reflect on the findings. The COCSI survey was actually launched in conjunction with the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Fund for Social Services and Micro Businesses at the Pottstown Area Health and Wellness Foundation. The fund was launched in June, and it continues to serve a dual purpose. But when it launched, we launched it with the mini grants program that prioritized awards for organizations standing up the social safety net, as well as burgeoning businesses who contribute resources and wonderful products and services in the Pottstown borough. And I won't talk a lot about the business, the micro business grant today, but we prioritize businesses with a majority ownership rooted in historically marginalized communities and those that employ a high percentage of Pottstown residents. To date, the Relief and Recovery Fund has awarded more than $255,000. About 44%, if you see this bubble here on the second, on the graph to the right, 44% went to support education. And that includes a matching gift that was awarded to spark the Foundation for Pottstown Education's effort to support the Pottstown School District's drive for laptops. $10,000 was also awarded to TCN's Amazing Raise, and that supported organizations across the Tri-County area, including many of which who are here today. And efforts are still underway to raise additional dollars for the fund to help respond to emerging needs. Just a little bit more about the fund. Its development was informed by insights gleaned during community conversations and other collaborative efforts to better understand and better make efforts to address the community's most urgent needs. And for example, to arrive at decisions for awards to the Relief and Recovery Fund, the foundation and my colleagues and I had the honor to serve alongside representatives from Pottstown area anchor institutions in a participatory grant committee. This is a new approach for the foundation, and this is one of many first steps that we're taking to more thoughtfully engage and empower the community in decision-making processes. We also reviewed and talked to the producers of many other data sets, one of which was the PHL Nonprofits COVID-19 survey. And we just want to recognize your efforts to not only pivot your services during a time of great uncertainty, but also to take time to contribute knowledge and a large number of data and information to a large number of surveys. And that includes the COSI survey that we're here to talk about today. So today we're going to share and make meaning of some of the findings, gather additional data in the response to the pandemic that have both occurred throughout the response and our plan in the future. And we definitely want to hear from you about your plans to learn and prepare to better support our community both now and in the future. So I'll pass the mic to my colleague, Aisha Cooper.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aisha Cooper. I'm another program officer at the Pottstown Area Health and Wellness Foundation. I see many familiar faces this morning. I see a few new faces, so welcome everyone. Next slide. So like Howard said, we launched the survey in the beginning of June, and then we closed towards the end of June, approximately 7 weeks. We looked at different ways to communicate and distribute the survey, including email, website, a lot of word of mouth. So many of you heard us give our speeches about the COSI and the importance of completing it. We do want to recognize that there are data limitations to the survey. It is specifically targeted towards our service area at the foundation, which TCN also serves. We do recognize, and as many of you know, there was and continues to be a substantial amount of adverse impact in our community as a result of the pandemic, including general operations, the ability for folks to raise funds, and of course, how we service our community. Many of the organizations noted that there were furloughs where some of that is tapering off now. There were multiple event cancellations, needing to shift to a different mode for those events. And of course, basic needs and other demands on the safety net occurred and continue to occur to this date. There was a lot of collaboration that was stood up during the pandemic and continues to, I'm happy to say, continues to be in existence as we get through this crisis together. Most of that collaboration is around information sharing and best practices, and not so much around financial collaboration or program delivery, according to the survey. We also took the time in the survey to collect some information in relation to diversity, equity, inclusion, especially in relation to vulnerable and underserved populations. We continue to recognize that most of you on this call are experts in a lot of the data we collected. And so like Howard said, we definitely want to save space to hear from you as we go along in our presentation today. Next slide. So here are some high-level numbers that came out of the survey. The greatest barriers from working remotely were service barriers. A lot of the services that our community partners provide are in person, and also we did not have the technology capacity that other communities may have had. I think we hope that that continues to change, but during this time, that was one of the most significant barriers. So I'm not going to read all of these numbers, but I do want to say, as I was reading and analyzing and thinking about this information, behind all of these numbers are lives, people, families, and our community. So as we dive in and dig in like we always do, that is what I continue to have in my forefront, and I know that many of you do as well. Next slide. Okay, so next slide. So a little bit of more information about barriers to service delivery. So as you know, many of the organizations are continuing and did during this survey and continue to experience disruptions, especially in relation to finances, human resources, funding, cash flow. And I know that there was a lot of pivoting towards application to rapid response funds and things like that. So this was one of the most significant areas in service delivery that was identified in the survey. Like Howard mentioned earlier, we did look at this that data in comparison to the PHL fund. That was the closest data set that we could compare it to. But again, the limitation, I just want to bring that up again, is in relation to our service area. So in comparison to the PHL fund, we had even more barriers, 10% in relation to cancellation, 10% greater in relation to cancellation of programs and events, and a little bit more in relation to experiencing increased demand for services. So I know that myself and Howard and Craig and other folks, Holly in particular, were really making sure that we connected as many nonprofits to each other to provide those basic needs. So we definitely continue to do that and recognize that that is a significant demand in our area. Next slide. So like Howard said, we definitely want to hear from you. So we're going to begin to utilize the chat. I want everyone to take a moment, albeit very difficult, to reflect back on the beginning of this pandemic. And, you know, right before we shut down, I want you to think about the capabilities and the capacity of your organization. And then I want you to take a mental journey through the pandemic and think about those moments. And in the chat, list one way you've successfully engaged your clients differently than you had before the pandemic. So go ahead and pop those comments in the chat. What's something that you had to do to shift and engage your clients differently in order to continue to provide the services that you needed, that they needed? Ken, Zoom meetings. We are all experts on Zoom now, aren't we? Virtual programming. Carla, thanks for your honesty. Home visits. Outside programming, yes, Casey, yes. Medicine in the park. All right, continue to populate the chat. Next slide. So again, I'm going to engage you one more time. And I want you to think about where we've been and where we are headed. So on the left, we have some things that we leaned heavily on prior to the pandemic. Standalone fundraising clinics and workshops. I know the foundation, we've had several of those. And we're looking at shifting towards integration to fundraising support ongoing. And I'm going to pause because I want Holly to share a little bit of information about something they are doing in connection with Amazing Race to integrate fundraising and support.
Aisha. So in connection with TCN's Amazing Raise, for those of you who do not know about Amazing Raise, I will put or ask Ashley to put the link to the site in the chat so that you can check it out. Amazing Raise is moving toward adding a development lab component to the event so that we're providing a lot more targeted and intensive fundraising support and consulting support for the folks that are participating in Amazing Raise. So the organizations like yourselves that are participating have access to this very targeted year-long fund development support that typically if you had to pay for these services, it would probably cost a fair amount of money. So we're really trying to provide you with no cost services that will greatly impact you, not only in the Amazing Raise, but to help you with your fundraising year long. So to help you with your annual campaigns, to help you to diversify your funding, to help you to try new things. I think that is sometimes a barrier for nonprofits, that, you know, we sort of lean on the things that we've always done because they are somewhat safe, and, you know, typically they have a fairly good track record. However, the development lab through Amazing Raise will give you the opportunity to try new things and pilot some things that maybe you normally wouldn't do as part of your development plan or your fundraising program. So it's important to us to continue to upgrade Amazing Raise as a support for your fundraising effort and to boost philanthropy in the community. So everyone, you know, go check out the Amazing Raise site. Ashley put it in the chat. There's also information on TCN's Facebook page as well as our website. If you're interested in participating in Amazing Raise and you're not already registered to do so, please drop us an email. I will put my email in the chat and we'll connect with you. Thanks, Aisha.
Thanks, Holly. Another thing that we were used to, and we continue to do, and still has a place at the table, is professional roundtables. So a lot of convening. We're actually looking at using and encouraging more collaboration, program collaboration, and other collaborations, initiative collaborations. We are better together, and shared resources can be very powerful. So we have a Tri-County Health Council, which, Casey, I'm going to call you out, is a part of, and it's a great, really effective way at tackling some of our health challenges in our community. And so we're definitely looking to support more of those initiatives. And I think that everybody recognizes that there was definitely a variability in technology capacity. We need to increase our technology capacity in our community, from schools to our nonprofits to our clients and their ability to navigate technical systems. This is an innovation. This is an innovation step that we need to take. It's going to be a necessity as we move in this pandemic and in the future, whatever that brings. So if you would like, please add any additional shifts that you may think of in the chat. You can start by putting where we were, and then after that, ... and then where we're headed. Next slide. All right. I'm gonna, while everybody's putting in their chat, I am going to pass the baton to Holly, and she's gonna speak to you about collaborations and partnerships.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Next slide, please. So right now we'd like to play a video of a really great example of collaborations and partnerships that have developed during COVID-19.
At Trellis for Tomorrow, we use parks, preserves, and gardens as living classrooms to teach vital skills and to help our communities become healthier and more resilient. Working closely with our many partners, we have established dozens of organic gardens, out of which more than 85 tons of locally grown, nutrient-dense food has been harvested and shared with neighbors who need it. It's been really incredible to see all the good growing from this effort. Together with the support of amazing people just like you, Trellis is working to make sure everyone has a seat at the table and that there is plenty of food for all. To learn more, visit us at trellisfortomorrow.org.
Next slide, please. So Trellis, along with organizations like Green Allies and the Pottstown Hospital, Tower Health, and Mosaic, really provided a lot of food insecurity support through the pandemic, and offered a lot of their extra produce to many community organizations. So I know that the Ricketts Center, for example, the Senior Center, as well as Pottstown Cluster also stepped up and provided a lot of important food insecurity services. But distributing that produce among community organizations and community partners was really huge. In fact, the Senior Center was able to not only give out the produce that they had, but also use it to make their drive-through meals. So, we just kind of wanted to highlight some of that work as collaborations and partnerships that developed through the pandemic. So a lot of you reported on the survey that you were already partnering with other organizations pre-COVID, which is obviously something that TCN as a collaborative organization likes to hear. And the ways that you partnered, you can sort of see on this pie chart, that primarily focused on, information sharing, as Aisha mentioned. So best practices, sharing each other's events, providing reliable information and trusted partnerships. A number of you increased your collaborations as a result of COVID. But one thing that we found through the survey is that there are a lot of different opportunities available to increase the amount of collaborative partnerships that you have and the ways that you partner. So next slide, please. So right now we're going to take a quick poll. I will ask Howard to launch the poll. Please choose one area that you feel your organization could currently benefit from a potential partnership or collaboration with another organization.
Just over the half way point. Actually, about 60% of attendees have now responded.
Okay.
All right, looks like we're just about there. So I'm going to go ahead and end and share the results.
Thanks, Howard. Okay. So as you can see from the results, the top two ways in which you've indicated that you would like to partner with other organizations is around fund development and program delivery. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So interestingly enough, that really dovetails into this slide. Where we've been, as I mentioned, was mainly information sharing, some referrals between organization, and collaboration that might have been driven by a funder. So the Health and Wellness Foundation maybe is putting you together with other organizations to collaborate on some different programming. But where we're headed, I think, is toward deeper program integration, collaborative funding, and some shared staffing and services. So what do we mean by that? Program integration can be a lot of things, but I think what we found during this pandemic, and as evidenced by previous slides, is that organizations have had a difficult time, especially if they were traditionally face-to-face, in delivering their services and their programs in meaningful ways. you know, it's been great that we have the technology to be able to do these things and sort of see each other. But I think it's been difficult for some organizations to replace that face-to-face service and the face-to-face contact. And some organizations have even reported that they've had to basically pause some of their programming as a result of COVID. And that just means that there's, you know, a loss of that programming in the community. So we're really encouraging organizations to collaborate in ways that promote program delivery. So if you have a program that may be dormant that another organization could deliver, we encourage you to partner with them to deliver that program so that you all are kind of getting, you know, a piece of the pie and everyone's getting what they need. There is also mechanisms for mergers of organizations and programs. TCN also has the ability to umbrella your collaboration. So if you're interested in partnering with another organization, but your organizations collectively do not necessarily want to be the lead on that partnership, or look for the funding for that partnership, you know, steward the partnership, you can come to TCN and we can support you with that. So I think deepening our program integration is going to be key in moving forward. Collaborative funding. So these are the top two things that you mentioned in your poll. Collaborative funding is crucial, and you know, we all, I think, it can be very scary for nonprofits because everyone is sort of scrapping for the same dollars. So the thought of sharing, you know, the pot with other organizations might be a little scary. But we've found that going after larger amounts of money, especially when it comes to national foundations or state grants or government funding, is very beneficial to have multiple partners in the mix, and funders do like to see that collaborative effort. So I think deepening our collaborative funding streams is going to be extremely useful. I know the foundation has hired a grant writer, and Chris, I believe, is on the call today. So nice to see you. I think it's interesting that the foundation is really looking to bring more dollars into Pottstown. That's not something that every foundation does. So I appreciate that role and that relationship that the foundation has with all of you. So I know that the grant writer is going to be focused on some of that work. TCN also does a lot of collaborative funding. So that's something that we're going to be looking at deepening, not only with our development lab through Amazing Raise, but also through, you know, our program initiatives. So through workforce funding, our youth program funding, looking at transportation as a community issue. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity to step out of that comfort zone and that scary space in terms of collaborative funding, and also shared staffing services. So TCN actually is modeling this practice. We are sharing an administrative assistant with Mosaic, because we both had a need but didn't have a need to fill a position full time. So we were able to collaborate and share some resources. So I think, you know, thinking about those things is something that's really important in moving forward. So next slide, please. All right, I am going to turn it back over to Aisha, I believe, for the diversity, equity, and inclusion talk.
Next slide, please. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI, is critical. In my perspective, it's something that is extremely important to our community. Equity is important to our community. And so we need to definitely put this in terms of at the top of the list in terms of priority to ensure that all have what they need to thrive and be successful in our community. So we did take a small dive into this topic in our survey, and we have some initial information here. We are, as a foundation, going to be going more deeply into this space and looking at racial equity. But for now, we do have some preliminary information that informs our work. In the survey, 79% of the respondents have established policies and practices supporting DEI. So that is good news. I think that could be higher. And then 16% of the organizations are led by persons of color. That's a disappointing number. And that is something that we definitely need to analyze and look at and see if we can have a change dynamic there. There's some other data which I'll have you review on the slide. Next slide. So we definitely looked at vulnerable populations, and for those of you that may have applied for rapid response funds, you may have noted that this was a very significant question in order to obtain some of those funds. A lot of funders and folks that were a part of those initiatives looked to ensure that those that were the most in need, that we collected that information, and so that we can see what organizations were supporting those individuals. So as you can see here, there are definitely some higher rates in agencies with more than 50% of clients in vulnerable populations. Most of our agencies in that category serve economically disadvantaged and children, youth, and young adults. So those were the highest rates. Not so many organizations serving the homeless, although many of you probably recognize that is a vulnerable population with many layers of need. And so we really need to look at that because it's important. You know, the folks that have the least definitely need a seat at the table, and we need to recognize that we have many vulnerable populations in our community that need serving. And then looking at this chart as well, we can see that the LGBTQ plus AI plus organizations, vulnerable populations not being served in relation to this particular survey. So agencies with less than 10% of clients in vulnerable populations, we see their data here as well. So just looking at this chart, we've got a lot of work to do. And this is not like a criticism of anybody. This is just the state of where we're at. And we are definitely looking at this data and moving forward. That's all we can do right now. We can learn from our past, and that informs our future. And I'm glad that we have this opportunity to dive in and speak with you today. We're going to have many more conversations to see how we can tackle some of these challenges. But like I said, again, we definitely have lots of room to improve. Next slide. So again, engaging all of you this morning, thinking about areas of the social human service sector. What racial inequity do you see in the field? So again, in what areas of the social human services sector do you see racial inequity in the field? Go ahead and take a moment to think about that and begin to populate the chat with your responses. Holly chimed in right away with healthcare. Definitely seeing that. I mean, with this pandemic, that's pretty apparent in terms of access to vaccinations and transportation barriers to healthcare, education. We saw that especially with ability to have virtual resources and more, special education needs, imbalance there. Food access continues to be a barrier for folks, and we all know that those fundamental needs of each individual, called Maslow's hierarchy, if we don't have food and shelter, and we can't be our best selves. Homelessness, Keep going. All right, continue to populate. Next slide. Behavioral health. Thank you, Casey. Whoops. All right, so again, we're going to take a look back and then reflect moving forward. So in terms of DEI, we see where we've been has been organization specific initiatives. So again, this is not to say that there's, there's no criticism here. This is just a reflection on the state. So there have been very like one-off, my organization's doing this, that organization's doing that. And what we really would like to see is more integration, cross sectors, connecting, sustainable learning communities, advisory groups that really come together and work together to move the needle on DEI and racial equity needs. So I'm going to pause there for another baton toss to Holly, because she is a part of a very incredible regional initiative called the RELC, which I'm a part of. And Holly, would you mind sharing a few words about that?
Sure, of course, Aisha, thank you. So the RELC is the Racial Equity Learning Community. The three collaboratives in the area, so that's TCN, ICN, which primarily operates in Norristown, and the Bucksmont Collaborative, which is Bucks County and Upper Montgomery County, have come together with funding through the Health Spark Foundation to create this Racial Equity Learning Community. So the ultimate goal of this community is to provide training tracks for organizations to participate in boosting their racial equity lens. So integrating racial equity into all facets of their organization and really meeting organizations where they are. So part of this process is going to be allowing organizations that are participating to do their own inventory to find out where on the continuum of racial equity they are with their organization, whether it's at the board level, the staff level, or like I said, delivering all of their programs through a racial equity lens. So it's really going to be an informative process for organizations to be introspective, but also on the back end to provide all of our nonprofits with the tools that they need to really implement a lot of what's going to come out of this learning community. So we just had our first advisory committee meeting. So I know that David Charles was there, as well as Aisha. And I believe, Bill, I'm not sure if you were at that meeting as well. So we talked a little bit about what this kind of looks like for our community. And that advisory committee is made up of about 25 individuals from across Montgomery County, representing all sectors and all, sort of walks of life and backgrounds to really help us to inform the process. And we have a consultant through the NINA Collective, which they are fabulous. So I'll put their information in the chat if you want to kind of take a look at some of the work that they've done. But we're really focused on making sure that our community and the nonprofits in our community have access to what they need to be able to view their programs, deliver their services, and run their organization through a racial equity lens.
Thank you, Holly.
Thanks.
Another reflection on where we've been are, there's been a lot of conversations and discussions around DEI and racial equity. And what we're looking more for in terms of transformation is analyzing data to inform goals and action steps. So what can we actually do to move the needle again, like I mentioned before, on equity in this area. And so that is, we're taking definitely more steps in that direction. And then finally, where we've been and has been a lot of events and programs, and those definitely serve a place. But ultimately, what we're looking at is systemic change. So after those events and programs are over, what are folks' lives like in the community? Is there an equity environment that they feel comfortable in, that they have the same opportunity and the same experiences as other communities that have more resources? So we're definitely looking at that deeper level of dynamic in our area. So I know that there are so many other things that, you know, fit into this category. So I'm really looking for your responses in the chat. I know that we have some organizations that do deeper work in this area on the call. So looking to hear your feedback in the chat, and what you think, either where we've been or where we're headed, and some things that we might need to look at as we work with the RELC and other initiatives through the YW. I know Strive does some of this work. Thank you. I'll give folks about a minute and then we can transition to the next slide. Thank you, Ken. So LaSalle, so just while we're having people add additional ideas in the chat, the foundation does offer technical assistance. And so LaSalle is that organization that the foundation partners with. I know that Holly also offers technical assistance. So the more that we can help organizations do resources in this area, that will help them grow and develop to that change state that we're looking for. Thanks, Ken. All right, next slide. All right, so where do we go from here? And I'm going to pass it over to Holly, who will take us through where we are, the direction we're moving next. And I see that David Charles added something into the chat. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Aisha. So, you know, we want to make sure that what we're doing in this process continues to be a living document and not similar to what you do with a strat plan. Sometimes you do a strat plan, you put it on the shelf, and then 2 years later you pull it out to do another one. But this process for us needs to be ongoing, needs to be a living document, and needs to continue to collect the data to support different efforts that TCN is making, but also our foundation partners and other folks in the community are making to actually influence some of these issues that have been presented in the survey. So we are compiling all of this data that has been, you know, obviously shared today and that you've shared as part of the process, and we'll continue to share out changes that are being made as a result of you know, of this work, and to really utilize this and other resources to help build your capacity. I see that Joe put something in the chat. That's a great idea, Joe, and TCN is happy to to look at facilitating something on getting nonprofits together to brainstorm about how we can move forward in some of these areas. That's a fabulous idea, so thank you. So this is the type of information that we're looking for. As you think of things, please don't hesitate to drop us an email, whether it's to TCN or to the foundation, of just some things that you're thinking about, or some exciting, initiatives or ways to partner that you've come up with. We're always happy to take a look at these things, but we want you to know first and foremost that we do look at this information, and that we as an organization that builds capacity for nonprofits, but also the foundation and the general community does look at this information to help inform our work, and what we're providing to you in terms of our resources. So would love to have more information from you. If you get off this call and you think of something, like I said, please don't hesitate to contact us, one of us, all of us. I see Tessie said SCORE has helped businesses during the pandemic, with the PPP loans. Absolutely. So, these are the types of resources that we need to tap into as a community, and also that TCN can help to compile and direct you to as well. So, next slide, please. Okay, so in wrapping up, I'd like to invite all of you to either post in the chat or unmute yourselves if you have questions, comments, suggestions, or anything that you'd like to talk about in relation to what's been presented today. Anyone? Comments, questions, experiences, something that's worked well for you during the pandemic?
I have a question as far as all of this information, which is great, and thank you all for presenting it. But what do you suggest is our next step? Where do we go with this information now?
Well, I'll just speak from TCN's perspective that it's really, like I said, helped to inform how we can better support you in some of these areas. But I do like your idea of sort of brainstorming as a group to address some of those needs and the collaborative issues in particular. So the collaborative funding, collaborative programming, those types of things definitely need a forum so that we can address that information in a more cohesive way, but also in a more inclusive way. So I do like that idea, and that's something that I will definitely put on my radar, but I'll invite anyone else and our foundation partners to talk about what they would suggest.
Also, Holly, in your talk about the RELC, I didn't hear you mention it. Maybe you did and I just missed it, but there is a meeting this afternoon. Could you share that link with people that may not have registered for it and like to?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. We have a listening session this afternoon. I will be sure to put the registration information for that session in the chat. It's basically to gather some data from all of you to talk about, kind of where you are on the racial equity continuum, and to learn as we build the process for how we're going to support the nonprofits through this work. So the meeting is at 2:30 today via Zoom, and I will put the information in the chat. This isn't the first session. This is the first session, but we will have multiple sessions for the future to allow for you to, share some of your thoughts and wisdom, and to really, kind of talk through some of this effort. So thanks, Joe.
I thank you all for your presentation. I really like the thought about collaboration between organizations, sharing resources, sharing staff, going after national money for our programs in our community. I think we talk about collaboration sort of a lot, and I do believe that we do that. But we really need to collaborate as a community and move forward. Because there's a lot of issues that we just seen on here, and there's going to be more. And I think collaboration is the key. Sharing space. You know, I like what they're doing at the up at the Y, the old Y, where they're sharing space and they're connecting TCN, Mosaic, these organizations. I think that's important because I think building relationships with each other and talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, like in our own lives and in our organizations, and having an understanding of it deeply within is important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David.
So I just wanted to say, yeah, thanks. Great point, David. And also to respond to Joe's question, I think, you know, each organization, as we look at this data, there are, you know, many areas that we can potentially improve. I think, you know, having those conversations internally, you know, with staff, with board, you know, reflecting on studies such as COXI and trying to understand where your organization may be able to maybe take some internal steps or even engage with external partners to take steps together, I think is really important. I think while we continue to, you know, look for ways to work together, I also do believe it's very important for us to come into those conversations with, you know, clear understanding of our individual organizational goals, where we want to go, you know, some of the challenges we need to address so that we're clear on the steps that we can take and things that we can, you know, do together, as well as, you know, what we bring to the table to offer in collaborative initiatives and things that, you know, those needs that we collaboratively need to address. And I think it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but when we are clear on our goals and objectives as an organization, it helps us to, you know, be better partners.
And I'll add one comment in relation to collaboration. So like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's the Tri-County Health Council, which is one of the organizations that the foundation partners with. Holly is also a partner on TCHC, the Tri-County Health Council, and collaborative work it's hard, you know. In order, there's data to show that most collaboration fail, you know, within a year or two. So I think as we think about collaboratives, and I'm going to put an adjective in front of that, sustainable collaboratives, that we really need to think about structure and organization and how we build those out so that they last. And I know TCN has a lot of resources to do that. The other collaborative that I'm thinking about around that has really worked through ebbs and flows is the Pottstown Trauma Informed Community Connection, which I know some of you are part of. Wendy, I see you on the call. Those collaborative, you know, we've kind of like been through it. And I think that, you know, there's definitely something to be said about structure and how we continue to analyze what we're doing and transform as the community transforms, and think about how we can be our best selves. And I think we're definitely better together. So I'll just stop there. And I want to just recognize that collaboration is hard work, but it is so worth it. It's so worth it. And we do our best for our community and when we proceed in that way.
Thank you, Aisha. On that note, I believe we are almost at time. So I will give you 3 minutes back in your day. We really appreciate your participation today, and really look forward to working with you continually to build your capacity and support your efforts for all of the good that you do for the community. Aisha and Howard, any last wrap-up words?
Just thank you. Thank you all for all of your efforts, and yeah, giving us this time this morning to talk about data. Not always the most exciting topic, but very much appreciated, and yeah, I just enjoy working with all of you and look forward to continue to do so.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a great day.